Jeremy, thank you very much. When you extrapolate this data out right across the country, you realise how many ordinary working-class Brits are having to lose their jobs in order to make way for asylum seekers. It's ridiculous.
Yes, it's absolutely abysmal, and I think everyone involved should be hanging their heads in shame. First of all, I want to say that was a really good opening monologue on this subject, really terrific. Unfortunately, we seem to have a constant case of passing the buck. It's always someone else's fault, and it's always, but no matter whose fault it is, the government, whether it's local or national, will always find space for these asylum seekers whilst neglecting the needs of their local people, whether they be the local homeless or, like you're alluding to, local workers. And losing your job in this fashion, I mean, I've not ever lost a job in this fashion, but I have lost a job before, and it's an incredibly distressing process. It's not nice. It can be incredibly disruptive to one's lifestyle. And this has been happening again and again and again, up and down the country, and there's no end in sight. And I think everyone really needs to realise this is a result of a very bad government policy towards asylum in general, as well as the displacement in hotels. And it needs to come to an end, because this simply cannot go on any longer.
People are against the idea of controlling our borders because they think, oh, it's inhumane to do things like turn the boats back. It will be against people's human rights to deport them. Oh, everybody has a right to say, oh, I'll just believe that this person's a child and that they've come from a war-torn country. But I think where all of that falls down is when you ask them the serious question. So you would rather, would you, allow somebody who's just come to this country in a dinghy to stay in a hotel for free and be given taxpayer-funded food and board and all of this? You would rather that happen, and you would rather that a working-class person in this country lost their job. And I wonder whether or not this is now where the argument can be won, when people realise that people are being made redundant in the middle of a cost of living crisis as a result of what's been going on in the Channel.
Yeah, I think you fit the nail on the head right there. There's simply no consideration of normal people whatsoever. As you're saying, the asylum seekers are always given priority, and normal people are left to pick up the pieces. And these local areas, this will cause them to lose tourism. There'll be a range of secondary knock-on effects. These jobs might never return to the town. If a recession comes, we don't know if those hotels will be able to make up the same sort of business. And also, I don't think the economic argument that the government thinks it's making on savings stands up, because a lot of these people will end up going on the dole and having to be supported by the government itself. But they're not thinking about these things in the round. They're just thinking, okay, we need to find these asylum seekers somewhere to go. No matter the consequences, let's do that. Because to them and their friends in, the middle of London, I mean, I am in London right now, but in that circumstances, that, they don't want to be seen to be ashamed and being mean to asylum seekers. But
there can never be a more stark example of the priority of people who have just arrived here illegally, many of whom we have no idea whether or not they've passed a criminal record check. As is evidence, whenever there is some kind of incident, there's usually a statement that's read out afterwards, which is something along the lines of, we are working to establish whether or not this individual has a criminal history in another country. So you are being lobbed with a load of completely random people from anywhere in the world on your doorstep, that they are being prioritised over local, ordinary Brits. And you make that economic argument. This time yesterday, we were having a discussion where some very worthy people saying, oh, well, look, have you seen that it's going to cost loads more to send an asylum seeker to Rwanda than it is to keep them here? Well, yeah, it isn't, though, is it? Because by the time that you've added in the cost of the hotels, the cost of poor Marjorie, the cleaner at Holiday Inn, who no longer works anymore, the cost of her having to move house or whatever it is, the local florist who no longer does the weddings at that particular venue, etc., etc., etc. The economic argument for this just doesn't stack up.
No, not at all. That government economic impact assessment was actually quite interesting to read in depth, and I think it has a lot of flaws. It does allude to those things you're talking about, yet they don't actually try to include those numbers in their total. They just sort of say, well, we know there is a local impact, but we can't estimate that. And then several of the other estimates in there seem to be, well, highly overestimated. Like it'll cost £20,000 to send someone to Rwanda. Just in terms of transport costs, which is more than double the average charter flight costs over the past few years. I don't know where they're getting these numbers from. But we need to get them on these planes and get them to Rwanda because, as it is clearly obvious to everyone, the UK doesn't have space for these people. We've got a housing crisis, a rental crisis, and now people are being putting out of their jobs in hotels. It's just not on.
No, absolutely. We're being asked to compromise financially, we're being asked to compromise culturally, we're being asked to compromise in terms of our safety, and now people are being asked to compromise by losing their jobs. And I would dare say that even the most ardent supporter of open borders, even the person who thinks that absolutely everybody should be allowed to come here to this country, you know what, I'll name him, even someone like the Archbishop of Canterbury. I reckon if someone said to you, Archbishop, you're going to lose your job, I mean, it would be a remarkable thing, wouldn't it? But if you lose your job as a result of someone coming over here, or you lose your place to live and everything, I would have thought maybe he'd change his tune, but I'm sure that day will never come, because like a lot of the people who spout that kind of rhetoric that he does, his life is relatively untouched by what's been going on. And I'll just finish as well by saying, you know, I was in a church the other weekend and there was a whip around and a load of support, etc., 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 for people who just moved in at a local asylum seeker hotel. Yeah, that's fine, but I happen to know that everyone who worked at that hotel has just lost their jobs. So where's the whip round for them? Look, Jeremy, we're going to have to leave it there. As you can tell, I'm quite animated about this. Jeremy Hutton there from Migration Watch UK.